happened at work.
Pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, the City Council of Bastrop will hold a special utility workshop meeting on Tuesday, September 15, 2015 at 6 p.m. Bastrop City Hall, Chambers, 1311 Chestnut Street, Bastrop, Texas, to consider the following matters. Call to order. We are called to order. We have a full quorum here. We are going to go into an closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following: consultation with attorney or attorneys regarding threatened or pending or contemplated litigation and matters upon which the attorney has a duty and responsibility to report to the government body.
We'll be back here.
We'll be back as quick as we can. City Council will return to our special utility meeting convened into a special training workshop first to consider the following: a presentation, review, and discussion providing the City Council with requested periodic update and training related to the city's code of ethics, state conflict of interest laws, council members' activities and roles, council members' duties to the citizens of the community of Bastrop, led by our city attorney. This is something that a lot of us haven't been through in a while. It seemed like a good time to tack this onto this meeting and let JC give us a refresher course. If there's anybody that can't see or hear, because this applies to most of y'all, please get where you can hear and see, or let her know you can hear. Thank you, JC.
I'll try to speak up. And we'll fly through this. I know that you have other work to do tonight. Each of you has a handout that has this information available to you too. Basically, what I've done is just try to pick out some points from our ethics ordinance and condense them into kind of news you can use. Our ordinance applies to council members. It applies to all city officials, including the city manager, the BEDC director, city attorney, city secretary, department directors, police chief, but also to the city council. One thing I thought it might be interesting for you to recall, because all of you have done this, some of you more recently than others, is that when you took your oath of office, you took an oath to uphold the ethics ordinance. Because you said that you would uphold and protect, preserve, defend the Constitution, the laws of the United States, this state, and the city code of ordinances. So what are ethics? Ethical behavior is doing the right thing when no one else is watching, even when doing the wrong thing is legal. And that's a quote from a fellow named Aldo Leopold, who was a Wisconsin river farmer back at the turn of the century. And there are a lot of quotes about ethics, but I kind of like that one because sometimes ethics, I think, requires you to go a little bit above and beyond just the black letter of the law. Our ethics ordinance does, however, point out some very specific things that council members and our city officials in general are supposed to do and not to do. And the first thing we're going to talk about are what I call the thou shalt nots. And stop me. I'm moving very quickly because I know we're cramped for time, but stop me if you have any questions. On some of these, I've stopped to give examples, but if you think of other examples or questions that you have, we'll try to address those as we go. The first thing is that a council member shall not take any action that is likely to affect the economic interest of people or an entity that's closely related to them. An economic interest includes interest in land, contracts, or other rights having more than a de minimis value. The state law or statute has a economic value and quantifies this as a substantial interest and uses dollar amounts like interest in stock over $1,500 or interest in real estate of $10,000 or more, or it puts specific dollar amounts on it. But when the city council adopted this ethics ordinance back in 2012, was it?
Before that,
11?
Well,
When
maybe
we adopted it, they determined that they wanted to be even more protected than that, and they went with a de minimis value, which is a value that's distinguishable or any value that's more than inconsequential. So some of you that are used to the old ethics law that says, well, if it's under $1,500 or under $10,000, that doesn't apply anymore. It's any value at all that's above something that's inconsequential. Council members shall not use your official position to unfairly advance or impede your or another's private interest, grant or secure for anyone else special consideration, treatment, exemption, or advantage, or represent to anyone that you will attempt to provide such advantage. And those are easy. The example of that would be you can't tell a citizen that you will get their utility connect fee waived. You may, however, ask the city manager to evaluate special conditions that might affect the citizen's utility bills and suggest that the city manager take whatever action is appropriate under the conditions. So you don't represent to a citizen that you're going to do something that's going to be to their advantage. Rather, you ask the city manager to evaluate conditions and take the appropriate action. A council member shall not have or acquire any interest in a contract, transaction, business opportunity, or other matter if their interest will be affected by some official action of the city. An example of that would be that a council member may not purchase real property that he or she knows will rise in value, specifically because the council is going to undertake an expansion project that is unknown to the general public at the time the member purchases the property. So you don't learn about something that the city's planning to do, take this confidential information, go act on it to your personal advantage for a profit. Those are things that you've heard about, I'm sure, in other locales, but that's something that we don't do under our ethics ordinance. Council members shall not enter into an agreement or understanding that they will be rewarded for taking an official action. An example is, you don't say, I will vote to approve your project if you'll buy my used truck. Yeah, or some such thing. Council members shall not be involved in the appointment or employment of any relative within the second degree of affinity, relative by marriage, or third degree of consanguinity by blood. We have those diagrams in our ordinance to help you with that. A council member may not vote to concur with or approve the mayor's appointment of the council member's son. So, for example, if the mayor says, well, I'm going to appoint Kelly's son to be, or employ him as police chief or whatever, no, you don't go along with that. That's too close to the relationship on the council. So that's something that you would recuse yourself from. Council members shall not accept any gift in violation of state law. And the council, you may recall, when we did our ethics ordinance, instead of trying to recap all of the graft, bribery, gift, honorariums, all of those state laws, instead we simply brought them into the ethics ordinance because the state does a very good job with those types of things. And so you'll want to refer back to the Penal Code, Chapter 36, to see about that.
Let me ask you.
Yes, sir.
Back up one.
Uh-oh. You're testing my...
No, this is an awkward deal, because under our charter, the mayor couldn't make an appointment like a police chief, but
Right.
Could somebody related to a council member be given the job of police chief?
Is someone related to it? I don't believe so.
Okay. Because, I mean, the city manager would do that, but I'm talking about,
Right, but I believe that's not only in violation, I believe that's in violation of our personnel policy.
I believe it's in violation of state law too.
It
Okay.
could be, but no, sir, I don't.
Even though they're not involved in the hiring process, I mean, they wouldn't be allowed?
Right, but we have a provision in our personnel policies. I don't have a.
Or even a department head?
Right.
Another- Okay,
Right.
okay.
But if they were employed
Prior,
Prior to him being a council member?
then it's okay.
then you're fine. That's kind of a grandfather, because we don't terminate employees who had a job simply because a relative runs for the council. But it can't be the reverse, where you've got someone that's on the council and then you come apply for a position. And I'm sorry, I didn't bring the personnel policies in, but that's in our personnel policy. You know, it may also be in our charter. Willie, I believe that's in our charter as well. A city council member shall not take or engage in outside employment that would impair their judgment or the faithful performance of their official duties. Here's an example. Remember council member Julie Hart. A council member who works for the Austin Convention Center cannot propose or take any action or encourage anyone else to prefer or send business to the Austin Convention Center over the Bastrop Convention Center. A council member's ethical duty is to the city, and that duty to the citizen trumps other outside work responsibilities if and when, gosh, I wish we knew what that said, but it's
There are
on
There are
the-
conflicts.
Thank you, thank you. So if council members have outside employment that arguably conflicts with something that the city's doing, they may not encourage anyone to take any action or take any action themselves that prefers that outside employment over the city's business. Council members shall not use their position to obtain official information for purposes other than the performance of their official duty. An example, it would be a violation of the policy for a member to contact the police department and ask the police chief to run a criminal background check on someone for strictly personal reasons, like somebody's dating your daughter or something. You don't do that. City council members shall not improperly disclose confidential governmental information that is gained through their official position. Confidential governmental information is, in general terms, all information that's not available to the public under the Public Information Act or made public by court order or the Attorney General's decision. So if you're provided confidential information in your role as a council person, it's a violation of the ethics ordinance for you to disclose that to anyone, because that, of course, disadvantages the city in its work. Council members shall not use facilities, personnel, equipment, or supplies for private purposes unless allowed by city policy, or these items are otherwise available to the public in general. In other words, you can use a city park, but you can't ask a city park employee to come mow your lawn.
Can you use a city iPad, but
Yes.
not for personal reasons?
Right.
Is that
You-
right?
Right. That's a piece of equipment that's provided to you to do your city business. And I'm sure that no one's going to object if you snap a picture of the grandchild or something on it. But what you can't do is use labor or personnel that's not provided to you in your capacity as a city council person to do private business. You shall not assist, encourage, or induce another city representative to violate the code of ethics. Kind of a no-brainer there. Induce or attempt to influence any subordinate to take or support any political action or position. In your role as a city council person, you are supposed to be neutral to your subordinates. Those are city employees. In other words, you don't say, I expect you to vote for somebody, or you need to put this sign in your yard, or I expect you to put this sign on your car. When it comes to political actions and decisions, every employee has their own independence, and
So they could choose to put a sign?
they can choose to. They can
But you can't
approach.
coerce them to.
You can't even ask them to. But if they approach and say, I'd love to put one of your signs in my yard,
That's
that's
okay.
not you asking them to do so. You shall not accept anything of value for political activities that are related to an item on a ballot. That's pretty obvious. You should not display political materials on city-owned vehicles. I don't believe any of you drive city-owned vehicles. Now, that's the don'ts.
Oh, I would happily not do that if.
If you could have a city vehicle.
That's right. I won't put a sticker on.
I'm sure. There are also some things that you're required to do, which we call the thou shalls. And these are for current city council members. Current city council members shall refrain from being involved in a discussion on any matter that is likely to affect the economic interests of people or entities that are closely related to the city council member. That's kind of a component of the one that we discussed earlier.
JC, to clarify, this includes Ken too, right, the mayor?
Oh, of course,
Okay.
yes. The charter makes clear that the mayor is a city council member. And of course, he's a city official.
Right. I'm not trying to pull,
No, no.
pinpoint him or anything, it just said council
I'm-
members only.
I'm speaking in a
Got it.
global sense. City officials must promptly file an official conflict of interest form with the city secretary, upon which he or she discloses the nature and extent of any conflict when applicable. So if you identify a conflict that you have, our ethics ordinance requires you to fill out a quick form and give it to the city secretary so she can keep it on file. And this really protects you because it gives a written record that you've gone on record as having a conflict. And then you'll recuse yourself from that particular action, as we've discussed in the past. Walk out of the room, get a cup of coffee, not vote, not discuss, and then when that particular item is over, you'll take the dais again and resume your responsibilities. In addition, city council members must formally disclose the conflict to their fellow council members. That's what you do when you're on the dais and you say, guys, I'm not going to be involved in this discussion. I have a conflict because of X. And then you simply get the form from the city secretary and go from there. Due to open meetings requirements, the disclosure must be done either in an open session or if appropriate in an executive session. City council members you are required, and we've talked about this a couple of times in the past, you're required to cast your vote on matters that come before the body. If you're not going to vote, if you're going to abstain for any particular reason, you disclose to attendees at the meeting and fellow council members why you're electing not to vote. For example, earlier this evening, they're not council members, but they're city officials. The Reverend Hines didn't vote to approve minutes, but she explained that she wasn't voting because she was absent from the meeting where the minutes were involved. So you explain, I'm not voting on this because, and everyone knows why. City council members shall conduct all of their city-related activities and affairs without bias or prejudice. Now, what some people forget, and I thought about skipping this tonight since all of you are current members and not former members, but I thought, well, let's go ahead and take a slide or two and remind you that the ethics ordinance carries, the obligations that you have as council members carries forward even after you leave office. Doc's eyebrows go up. I'm glad I included it then. As a former council member, you shall not represent anyone other than yourself or your family members on an issue related to your former council duties before the council or board or staff for a period of 12 months after you leave your council position. Now, you can always represent yourself, your personal interests, but you don't come and represent clients.
Will you give an example of that, JC?
Yeah, the most logical one, and I think the one that people were thinking of when this was discussed on the commission was, let's say you're a lawyer and you do a lot of land planning work, but you're on the council too, and all of a sudden your term expires and you're off and you're still doing your work, and you take clients, they come before the P&Z, they come before the BOA, all of a sudden you have a client that comes to the P&Z to get I don't know, a plat approved or something, and then it's time for it to come before the council. I can't represent, if I were the attorney council member, I couldn't come and make my argument representing my client to you. And the reason would be because the commission felt, and I believe the council agreed when they adopted this, that there's kind of a trust and a bond that's created between people that work together, and so there's an inclination just to kind of take their word for it, not make you jump through the hoops, do the drill. And so it creates an unfair advantage for people that hire ex-council members. And so for 12 months, you need to step back, let your law partner do it, let somebody else do it, let them carry forward. And don't impose yourself on your ex-council cohorts for a period of 12 months. Now, if it's my house, I can come talk to you about it. If it's my plat, if it's my development, if it's my thing, you can always represent yourself or your family member. We don't ask you to give up your personal rights of representation. What we're asking you to do is don't come do business. Don't come press your personal profession with your council members. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Former council members shall not state or imply that they're able to influence any city action on the basis other than the merits of the matter. In other words, you don't leave the council and say, I know these people, I can still get some things done. Tell me about it, I'll take care of it.
As if that were possible.
As if it were possible, but now you know it's not only not possible, it's not ethical. Don't represent anyone in litigation that's adverse to the city upon any matter upon which the city council member personally or substantially participated prior to leaving the city. That's because you may have learned things in your work with the city council that are confidential and you don't want, the city didn't want you to be involved on the other side of litigation. Former council members should not perform compensated work for another entity that's related to an existing contract with the city if the former council person personally and substantially participated in the negotiations or award of a contract. And this one is for a period of 24 months. Now, the city may elect to waive this prohibition. So let's say I'm on the city council, I'm working on the city council, we enter into a contract for the AMI, the automated meter system, and we just started working on that. We're working away like crazy, and I'm term limited out. I'll leave the council, and the AMI people come to me and they say, you know a lot about this, and we want you to be on our team. And all of a sudden I become the AMI representative to the city of Bastrop. No, we don't let that happen. Now, conversely, if there would be some advantage to the city for having me there, if I'm just the queen of AMI and there's no one else in the world that could do it as well as I could, and you know that you would be in awfully good hands if I were the AMI person for the city of Bastrop, you could waive it by formal action. But the point is, it's in the city's control, not in the ex or the former council member's control.
Progressive ways, you know, yeah.
There you go. Disclose confidential governmental information acquired during the service with the city. So remember, you can't disclose confidential information while you're on the city council. For a period of 12 months, you can't, well, wait, this may not have a time period. You can never disclose confidential information after you're off the council. So if it was confidential information when you were on the council, you must keep it confidential. So that's the ethics ordinance. But as we were preparing to go through this, people were saying, what else applies? What else might apply to us? And so we talked about beyond the city's code. As city council members, you have ethical responsibilities that are beyond those outlined in the city's code of ethics. Willie came up with one that's in the charter and in our personnel policies having to do with employment of relatives. But there are others as well, such as an appearance of impropriety. We came onto this one that I thought was an interesting, this is actually in the San Marcos Ethics Ordinance, but you've heard our Ethics Commission, you've heard all of us discuss avoiding the appearance of impropriety. And they say it this way, and I think it's a good way to think of it. Public service is a public trust. Council members are stewards of the public trust. You have a responsibility to the citizens of the city to ensure and enhance public confidence in your city government. And you must strive not only to maintain technical compliance with the principles of ethical conduct set forth in the code and state law, but also to avoid the appearance of impropriety at all times. And this has to do with the fact that you are a public servant. You hold a high position of esteem, and I'll get to a quote from the Texas Constitution that goes to that in a minute. In addition to our ethics ordinance, there continue to be state statutes that apply to you. The conflict of interest statutes found in the local government code, chapters 171 through 176. Open governments, you know, we've heard questions about walking quorums. We heard one tonight about walking quorums. That has to do with open meetings and open records. You still are required to comply with those. There are nepotism statutes, state statutes, dual office holding statutes, bribery, gifts, and graft. All of those continue to apply to you in addition to what's in our ethics code. What I wanted to remind you is this isn't the only thing that controls your performance and that you're responsible for.
What's the dual office?
Dual office holding says that you cannot hold two public offices of, they call it emolument. That means you can't be
Oh, tax
paid.
entities. Oh.
You can't be paid by two public employers
Oh, okay.
unless the statute says you can, but that's another deal. For example, you can't be a county commissioner and a city council person at the same time. So that's the two offices. Your office and your duty under the Texas Constitution. Council members in Bastrop hold offices of trust because you are vested with authority over some sovereign function of the government that you exercise for the benefit of the public. And this is what San Marcos was referring to. This is a quote from the Texas Constitution. As city council members, you hold offices of trust, and you have to exercise those for the benefit of the public, not for personal benefit, not for benefit of anyone else, not for individual benefit, not for benefit of employers, but for the benefit of the 8,000 people or 9,000 people, maybe it's 10,000 today, I don't know, that live here in the city.
Can we just go back to the appearance of impropriety for just a second?
Sure. Let's see if we can get there. I think we can.
I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
Now let me remind you, this is not your ethics code.
Right.
This was just a description of being a public servant and holding an office of public trust, which is what the Constitution says you hold. And I thought it was an interesting point.
So do we have anything that talks about the fact that we need to avoid the appearance of impropriety in our
No,
own?
no. Your own ethics ordinance does not have this provision in it.
And is this something that a lot of cities have?
Many. You can add it if you are interested in adding it. It's just not something that's in yours.
Okay, so if a person were giving the appearance of impropriety, would it be an ethics commission that decided if there was an appearance of impropriety, and what happens?
It's nebulous, and that's probably why it's not in our code. I will say that our ethics code has very strict enforcement measures, and so I think our ethics commission went with very concrete, definable things that could be enforced. To me, this is certainly something that you'd want to think about and something that you'd want to live up to, but it's not something that would be easy to enforce because one person's idea of what's an appearance of impropriety might not be another. If you added something like this, I think it would have to be exempt probably from the strict enforcement provisions for sanctions. In other words, I can't imagine removing you from under our ethics ordinance for giving an appearance of impropriety because who's going to judge that and under what standard? If you're going to have the enforcement standards that we have in our code, I think you have to have something that can more concretely be judged than an appearance of impropriety. This is a vaguer standard, but it's something that I think you'd want to think about.
And to add it, what must one do?
It's an amendment to the,
I mean, what is that process?
it's an ordinance. It's amending an ordinance.
Okay.
Your ethics ordinance is an ordinance. All that would have to happen is that the city council would want to decide that this is something, or something like this. And there are a million examples. I mean,
Or we could
Shan
submit it
and
to
I,
you could submit it to the commission and
Sure.
get their consideration and recommendation to the council.
sure, you could ask them to look at something that might be not an enforceable compliance deal, but a aspiration, a goal, a general guiding principle. Shannon and I, in preparing for this and other work that we've been doing, have looked at dozens of ethics ordinance, and that's where this one came up. And I thought, that's an awfully nice
I think that's
introductory.
really important.
It's a nice one, yeah. Anyway, but there are lots of nice ones, and we can get you examples if you'd like to see some, so.
Jesse, a lot of these things that you talked about as far as council members, a lot of this carry over to like board members?
All board members.
Okay. Let me ask.
There are
let me-
city officials.
Let me ask you a question this way. Now, I'm gonna go back to something in the mid-eighties that I saw in a meeting,
Okay,
and maybe it can happen today. Say if, a zoning issue or something that would affect me, say somebody across the street was, asking for some kind of zoning deal that I didn't like or something. And you're probably not gonna take part of the vote because you're part of probably the people that got within the 200 feet, probably got a letter from the city. Now, can you excuse yourself from the die and go out in the audience and participate in the
No.
conference? See, I've seen that done before.
What did you say, Willie?
I've seen it done years ago at the city council meetings, because I remember in the mid-eighties, that different people that were on like the planning and zoning and stuff, and people or neighbors, and they fell within that 200 feet, members of the planning and zoning excused themselves from the die and went out and participate in the public audience with, I mean, it happened, I mean, this was a common thing.
right. People are confused about what recusal means in the event of a conflict. If you have a conflict of interest, it used to be that people thought, all I have to do is not vote. I can sit up there and I can argue and I can talk and I can persuade, I can get off the dais, I can come into the audience, I can argue, I can talk, I can persuade, I can do whatever. But as long as I don't vote, I haven't tried to skew the process. But in fact, if you have a conflict of interest, what the law requires is that you not participate in any way in the deliberation, the discussion, the action, the vote, in anything.
But that person never returned to his seat until after that board had taken a vote, but he went out and
He participated in the discussion. He tried to sway the decision-making of the body, of the council, by taking a position and arguing it to the council. Now, his excuse would be, well, I'm a person with interest, I don't give up my rights just because I'm on the council. But regrettably, you make a choice that you're not going to try to persuade your fellow council members on a matter that you have a conflict on. If you're conflicted out of it, you're conflicted out of it, and you need to not be involved in it. If you own property, you can send a neighbor, you can send your wife, other people can be involved in it, but you yourself, as the elected official, cannot be involved in the discussion. You're conflicted out. You don't argue it, you don't discuss it, you don't decide it, you don't vote it.
I have a question, JC, and I'm going to use myself as an example because it's a real deal. I have an employment relationship with a board member of an outside organization in town.
Okay,
It's not a city organization, it's an outside organization.
okay. Is it an outside board?
Yeah, it's Boys and Girls Club.
Okay.
It's not a
Okay.
city board.
Okay.
So I have an employment relation with a member of that board.
Okay,
If the Boys and Girls Club requests funds from the city, I would recuse myself because
yes.
even if it's not my employer relationship person doing the requesting, it's still, he's involved with that
He's
entity?
involved in it. To me, I would recuse myself because your inclination to please your
Correct.
employer by doing something that benefits his
Right.
organization could be inferred to
That's
be
right.
swaying your judgment.
So I'm doing the right thing if I
Yes,
recuse
ma'am.
myself, even though it's not a city board, it's
Right.
an outside board?
Right.
Okay, good.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, we have a relationship, so.
What you
I don't
do
want-
is you say, can the action that I'm taking be inferred to be taken to please or benefit someone that I have an employment relationship with? And the answer to that question would be yes. And if that's the case, then step away from it.
I've got to ask this question, please excuse me, I'm sorry that's this, but how then can our mayor, who works for an outside organization, vote on the utility stuff?
On the city's utility stuff? Well, it's a city utility matter. He's
But-
not voting on an outside.
I've never
matter.
voted on a blue bond issue. We've only had one since I've been on the council. And I recused myself, and when we put it was a no-brainer when we put a substation in, I recused myself and stepped off.
Right. But if it's a city matter, that's a different thing. He's not voting on the city's utility matter to please someone else. Do you see the distinction
I mean,
between that
if the
example?
county comes in and wants to do a partnership with us, does Doc have to step out? Since he works for the county?
It would depend on what it was, but possibly.
But it's all about employment.
It's about employment.
Because, because one of the things I would say is that I'm beholden to a lot more people for other reasons than I am for financial reasons. I mean, if I were going to do something for somebody, I'd be much more likely to do it for reasons other than money. But the code doesn't call for that.
No, but the code does call for not doing it for personal reasons too. That's the advancement of, we discussed it in the Ethics Commission right before this one. That's the taking an action to advance a personal interest that's not an economic interest. So you don't do favors.
But you assume with the financial interest that it's a bad deal. But you're not going to assume it on I don't want my neighbor mad at me because he might not mow my grass for me when I'm old. I mean, you don't, I mean, there's,
I think it's easier
real
to
difficult.
infer. It's more difficult. It's more difficult. But, and it has to do with relationships, which are more difficult to establish or prove.
Well, can you give me an example? Sorry, Doc.
No, I was about to ask some questions
You
myself.
go ahead.
No, you go right ahead.
What would make Doc have to recuse himself, and what would make Doc not have to recuse himself?
Okay, conflicts of interest don't apply when a matter is of a global nature. So if it's, let's say that the county came to the city and they said, we want an easement to I'm making all this up, I can't think of one.
Okay.
The county came and they said, we need an agreement with you to get an easement across Chestnut Street where we can put in an electric line, give us an access easement. Well, that's not specific to Doc. It's not going to be an advantage to Doc. It's not specific to any of you. It's of a global nature. It benefits the community at large to be able to get electricity from this point to this point, or water from this point to that point. And so no one's going to say, ooh, well, Doc's only voting on this because he's works for the county. No, this has a public good that's arguably not personal in nature. And so I don't think anyone would say, well, Doc can't vote on that because, I'm sorry, Doc, but they were saying county, because he works for the county. Now, if Doc is feeling creepy about it, he can say, oh, I'm not going to vote on that tonight. But here's the difference. If the county comes in and they say, we're trying to get electricity over to the wing of the county annex where Doc's office is, and we can really upgrade it over there, but we need this contract to do that, and we want y'all to participate in the cost. Who's in favor of that? Well, then Doc needs to walk away from that bad boy because that's too personal.
Well,
Do you
that's
see?
That's what I was going to ask, because specifically I work for the county clerk's office, and so that's part of the county, but it's a whole
different deal. And so they're not going to be, so okay, here's another example that we do deal with all the time. The county comes to us and they say, let's enter into this joint election agreement. Well, there's no reason for Doc not to vote in favor of that. It's good for the public. It saves the city all kinds of money, if that's what y'all decide. Do you see, it's not a specific advantage to one component of the county government that happens to be an advantage to Doc. And so I don't see a conflict there. So you have to look at the specifics and decide how close you get to it.
Well, that would hold true for the mayor as well. I mean, there could be instances that Blue Bonnet and the city want to do something together that benefit our citizens, and I'm sure the mayor is going to recuse himself anyway, but I don't see any difference between Doc working for the county and Ken working for Blue Bonnet. I mean, as long as if we're doing something jointly with either the county or Blue Bonnet that's going to benefit our citizens, then I said, I don't have a problem with doing it, but I'm sure both of them will recuse themselves.
And it's their call to make.
Sure.
And that's the other thing that we can eventually get to, and that is that it's y'all's call to make. If you're not clear on it, or you want to talk it through, you can call us, and we'll give you our best thought on it. We're conservative. We always want to protect you against an appearance of impropriety or a complaint of a violation. And so we'll give you what we see as the pros and cons. But at the end of the day, you're the ones that make the decision based upon your circumstances. And the reason the law is written that way is because we can't ever know all the details. And you're the one that knows. You know how much is personally at stake at this. And so you have to take the risk that you're making the right call, and that somebody might challenge that, file a complaint, and then you're the one that will be supporting your position in it. So, but we're happy to talk it over with you.
Right.
Can we ask questions in the public? Are we allowed to?
Yes, you can ask a question.
If I may,
Sure.
you said it's up to the council member to know personally if they can recuse themselves. What if someone in the public wants to challenge a council member to be recused based on the ethics ordinance? What's that process like, or is it even possible?
I don't know if you're talking about a complaint or a challenge.
No, like if a council member doesn't recuse themselves for the vote, but someone in the public's like, actually, they probably should because of X, Y, and Z.
And we've seen that happen before in public meetings. Of course, the person that's chairing the meeting makes the decision about whether to recognize people in the middle of the meeting. But it's always possible to say, I have an objection here. I happen to know that, or I feel very strongly that so-and-so needs to recuse himself because of X, Y, and Z. Might be a discussion, then a decision is made. But at the end of the day, though somebody may make a statement, if the chair allows it, then the decision is up to the person. Okay.
Could you complain afterwards?
You can always complain.
No, but can you file a complaint with the Ethics Commission afterwards? Could a
Yes.
citizen do that?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's how the enforcement of the ethics ordinance is triggered, a written complaint. Duty of trust of loyalty. Holding a Texas office of trust imposes upon you a strict ethical standards of loyalty to the city and the citizens. We've discussed that. Simply put, as an elected council member, your duty is to serve the city and its citizens. If you feel pulled to serve the interest of other people or entities, you should recuse yourself from the matter due to a conflict that prevents you from performing your primary duty of loyalty to the city and the citizens. State common laws also apply. For example, common law incompatibility prohibits you from self-appointment, from self-employment, and from dual office holding unless expressly overcome by state statute. Your home rule charter also spells out some powers and duties of the council. You operate under a council management form of government. The council sets the policies, the manager operates and manages the day-to-day functions, and individual council members do not have authority to bind the council as an entirety to take any particular action.
Individual council members do not have authority to bind the council to take any particular action.
Right.
Does that mean that the council needs to give its permission for someone to go and represent the council?
Well, council members are at large. You can talk to people. I mean, if I run into somebody in front of the lettuce at the HEB as a council member and they say, I'm sick to death of these potholes,
Yeah.
I can say, I understand, and we're going to get right on that transportation plan or whatever. That's not binding the council. What you can't say is, I guarantee you that by tomorrow night, the council is gonna da-da-da-da-da-da. You can't bind the council. You act as a body. And so you have to make your decisions as a body. And you know this, you
Yes.
vote.
Yeah.
But you don't have the authority, even, let's say even at a formal mediation. Let's say you're involved, the city's involved in a lawsuit. This is the best example I can give you. And you decide that you want Mike and you to go be the city representatives at the mediation. And everybody fights back and forth, and finally, at the end of the day, you come to an agreement where you're gonna do away with the lawsuit if the city will do A, B, and C. Neither you nor Mike can sign that agreement and get rid of the litigation. That agreement has to come back to the council, and all of you have to vote on it. Individual council members cannot bind the city or the city council. You have to do that as a group. So a formal action has to be taken. That's what that means. Let's see. Oh, questions?
Well, on that last example, say for instance, that individual council member and the manager were at that litigation and they'd been given authority by the council. Is that possible for them to be given authority to take action on their behalf contingent upon, or does it have to come back then?
I think that if the authority were incredibly specific, let's say that the litigation was, I don't know, let's say an electric pole had fallen on someone's car, and we knew that the blue book value on the car, and no one was in the car, and the car was worth a maximum of $5,000, and we ended up going to mediation. I think the council could vote in advance that if you could settle the deal for under $10,000,
Yes.
you could
Okay.
sign it, and y'all would have to come out and
In public,
take an
of
action
course.
and say, we've given Councilmember McAnally the authority to bind the city council to settle this matter within the range. You couldn't give away the amount, or then you're not really mediating, you're just handing a check to somebody.
But we could,
But within the authority authorized by the city.
we could authorize Willie to pick the color to go paint the slab at 921 Main Street.
Yes. But you're
What
authorized.
color you want?
It's a secret.
That's right, that's
No
right.
secrets.
So there are actions you can take that send council members on authorized
Missions or whatever.
missions, yeah.
Say the county was trying to sell a piece of property to the city,
Okay,
and we sent the mayor or a council member with the city manager to commissioner's court and said, if you can buy it for X amount of dollars, and they'll sell it to you, or we'll sell it to them for, say, $500,000, they have the right, we can give the authority to go and do
yes,
that.
yes, but you see, you've acted as a group.
Yeah.
What you can't do is go over, Gary can't go over to the county and say, I'm the city. I'll give you $10,000 for that property. And trust me, they're gonna love it. You might love it, but you can't do it without checking with your cohorts and getting their formal authority that that's the permission that you've granted, so.
Any staff members or citizens got a question? Any questions?
Are you going to go through the enforcement slides?
I wasn't going to tonight. It's in your slides. It's just a recap of what our code of ordinance does, and I can go through it if you'd like to. In a nutshell, you have appointed commissioners who have the authority to hear complaints. They hear them in a judicial, kind of quasi-judicial fashion, and they decide cases. They decide complaints, they take testimony, determine whether or not there's veracity to them, and then they decide on an appropriate sanction that can be anything that ranges from we know you didn't mean it, please don't do that again, all the way up to you can never hold office in the city again, kind of thing. The Scarlet A or whatever, you know. So
Mayor.
it's a wide range. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. What's the role of citizens? Because I've been in several different communities. What's the role of citizens in terms of questioning something that's going on Or is that how the mechanism works?
Yes,
They go
ma'am.
to the ethics committee and they handle that?
No, actually, the way an ethics complaint is originated under our ethics ordinance is that a person that wants to allege a complaint puts it in writing, and it needs to be verified. In other words, it needs to be notarized or sworn to. And they actually hand that written complaint in to me, I believe. And I make, with any supporting documentation. And then I make just a first blush decision as to whether there's credibility to the complaint. I don't decide if it's valid or invalid, if it's justified or not. I simply decide this is a nutcase that's writing from a prison in New York and there's nothing to this, or this is something that needs to be referred to the commission. If it needs to be referred to the commission, then the commission calls the matter to order. They set a meeting, they hear the evidence, they decide how they're going to go about it, they listen to witnesses, they examine the documentation, and they make an independent decision based on that. But the trigger for starting the process is the written complaint.
So the criteria that you've outlined here is the criteria for issuing a complaint,
Yes,
making a complaint?
yes.
And then the ethics
The
commission?
role that the citizens play is that they're the ones that hold the city officials, not just the council, city attorney, city manager, all of the city officials, the directors, to this standard. And if they feel like we haven't met this standard, then they have the authority to file a complaint and say, you know, I want to file a complaint against J.C. Brown. I believe that she took a bribe, da-da-da-da-da. I have evidence. I have a picture of her with a bag full of money right before she gave the lecture or whatever. And then you start the process.
So that's the process if somebody wanted to remove an elected official?
No, that's the process if you want to file an ethics complaint. Are you talking about a recall? Or removing an official?
I just got my answer then.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's good. That's fine.
Well, that's an ethics complaint. There's another process for removing officials, or well, not for removing officials, for removing city council members. And that's spelled out in our charter. And that's the charter that the citizens adopted. It's our home rule charter, and I don't know the section, but that process, it's called referendum and recall. So for example, if the city passes an ordinance that you don't like, the citizens have a way to get things undone. If elected officials are performing in a way that the citizenry doesn't like, there's a mechanism to have them recall, and that's called a recall election. And I believe, I'd have to look at it, but it's something like, and I was asked this not long ago, which is why I've read it recently, is a petition is simply a piece of paper that's signed by, I believe, 25% of the citizens of the city who were registered to vote in the last city election. Not who voted in the last city election, but who were registered to vote in the last city election. They would sign a petition saying, I want to recall X and Y and Z. Then the petition is turned into the city. The signatures are verified to make sure that they're actual citizens, that they're not forgeries, that there aren't duplications. I've gone through this process in another town that I represent, which is why I'm familiar with it. And you'd be surprised how many John Does will sign a petition. But so you check out all the signatures, you compare the number with the number that's required in your charter. 25% of the citizens registered to vote in the last city election. And if you reach that bar, then you put out a ballot, you post an election, and the citizens go and vote to either recall or not. And if the majority, 51% vote then they're out of office, and the office is vacant. And then you fill the vacancy as per the charter as well.
Does that petition have to give a reason, or is it just X number of voters and you don't even have to say why?
No reason,
Ah, okay.
no reason.
JC, can you touch a little bit about the Open Records Act and what responsibility council members have to maintain records on their personal cell phones, personal emails that discuss city business, and if they're subject to the Open Records Act?
I can, I don't know how far afield with the time, but I can.
Any council members want to hear the answer?
I'd like to.
Let's hear it.
Sure. Open Records Act, there are, and I'm going off the top of my head because I didn't come entirely prepared for this tonight, but the Open Records Act requires that city officials maintain public records for a certain period of time, but that's controlled by a state agency as to what that period of time is. And it has to do with the utility and usefulness of the information that's relayed. So for example, I believe the state says that emails can be destroyed or thrown in your trash box or wherever you think you put them that gets rid of them as quickly as their useful function has been taken care of. So you're not required to keep every email that you've ever written about city business forever. Generally speaking, the city's record retention policy is 3 years, which mirrors the state's retention record. And that would be for things like we keep our agendas. Now, are you required to keep all of the scribbling on your agenda? No, you don't have to keep scribbles beyond the life of the utility view. If you've made notes on them, you know, lettuce, tomato, eggs, loaf of bread, that can go. But if you've made important notes about something that the city needs to do and you turn that into the city secretary, she's going to keep those notes as city records for 3 years, and they become important in that way. Texts, emails, phone call records are all city records if they have to do with city business. So for example, if you use a personal cell phone, we can talk to Hillary Clinton about this, but if you use a personal cell phone to make, to do public phone calls, and you get an open record request for the phone records of every phone call that Councilman Jackson made on this particular day, that's an open record request, we can get the record, but then we would have a right to redact private numbers that had to do with private calls. We'd have to do that through an AG request and indicate that those were not city-related calls, and we'd have to provide numbers indicating who those calls were and da-da-da-da-da. But if it had to do with city business, then the public would be entitled to know.
So are open records or the texts on your phone?
Texts are open records. Phone conversations, in other words, phone numbers and the time that you talked can be open record.
Email.
Any document, emails, texts, anything that you produce related to public business. Social media accounts can be public records if you do it in the capacity of a public official and it discusses public business. Now, if it's a text to your husband saying, don't forget to pick the children up from daycare, I don't even care if it's on a city phone, that's not public business. And that's something that the AG is not going to have us produce. But if you text someone and say, you need to vote yes on such and such and such and such, then that can be a public record. Is that what you needed?
Yes, ma'am. And I only ask because it was actually brought up. I used to cover the city of San Marcos.
Oh, boy.
And it was brought up, and some council members were receiving text messages from the audience, like asking questions, policy questions during
yikes.
council meetings. and some council members were texting each other. So all of that,
No.
yeah,
no,
all of that became
no.
a huge mess that I had to cover. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Well, see, real life example here. Don't do that.
right.
Yes, ma'am.
Under the current ethics ordinance as it's written, could a citizen file a complaint about a council member having an appearance of impropriety, or could they not, since it's not specifically in the ordinance right now?
A citizen can always,
Well, I guess,
File a
would it be
complaint.
passed to the ethics commissioner, or
I
would you
don't-
say no?
I don't believe an appearance of impropriety would be passed to the Ethics Commission at this point because we don't have an anti-appearance of impropriety statement in our ordinance. But this ordinance is very inclusive and broad. And so generally speaking, things that appear inappropriate are likely,
So if a citizen said, oh, X council member did this or has a relationship with this, you could just send it to the ethics commission and they would decide if it's something.
right.
You wouldn't say, oh, no, and not let it go to the ethics.
No,
commission.
no. That's, and trust me, the Ethics Commission and I discussed this at length. I'm not the gatekeeper for this is covered or not covered. They would be that. I'm the gatekeeper for the crazy
irrelevant
man
stuff,
that wants money for his uncle in Africa or something. You know, it's just a very minimal gatekeeper kind of thing. This is something that deserves the time that it's going to take for the commission to convene it and start working on it. But if it has a semblance of reality and there's documentation that supports it, then I can tell you the commission is going to be the one that makes the decision on it.
What if it's just a remark? How do you document something like that? Somebody overheard somebody say something that they thought it was inappropriate.
I think it simply needs to be just a written statement. I'm concerned. I believe it was a violation. I overheard someone
So you don't
say.
need like a videotape or
No.
recording
All
of
of
it.
this would be eventually proven or disproven by sworn depositions. The commission has the ability to depose witnesses, and so people would have to state under oath that they heard someone say something. They got a phone call where someone told them something, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then the commission makes the decision based upon the credibility of the information that's developed that way. It's very much like a trial. You know, there'll be some he said, she said, but at the end of the day, there's.
Just so y'all know, I'm not talking to anybody ever again.
Okay, my work here is
Never.
done.
Sorry, I have one more question. Since the commission was started in, was it 2012, have they
Maybe
reviewed
it's
any
2029.
complaints?
No, ma'am, they
Okay.
have not.
So there's been no cases reviewed at all?
There've been no cases reviewed, no complaints, no written complaints filed. You know, have people called and said, I'm concerned about this, or I have a question about that? We have conversations, but there have been no written complaints.
Are there any affidavits of conflicts of interest presently on file?
I'm sure there are. They would be with the Secretary's office, but they would be, I think, specific to,
Right, employers and.
well,
Of
either that or
Agenda items.
an agenda item that came
Oh,
out.
gotcha, okay.
They usually get filed prior to the meeting or right as the agenda item is coming out. I think that's where you'll see.
JC, you've been very patient with us all, thank you. I know we're all much better prepared to
We
move ahead.
appreciate the opportunity.
City Council will adjourn the special training workshop session and reconvene back in a special utility meeting and or take any actions necessary related to the specific workshop session, if any. We move on to item 3, which is we are adjourning now into a special utility meeting. Bastrop City Council will convene into a utility workshop session to consider the following, starting with item A. Mr. Talbot.
Yes, I think Tracy's handing out the reports.
Thank you, ma'am.
Didn't we already get this?
Yeah, but we didn't know if you bring them tonight or not. I'm just going to kind of walk through them fairly quickly, but at any point, feel free to stop if you want to discuss
What's a hot check for an event?
a hot check for an event. Oh, that's checking the electricity to make sure the electricity's working.
It wasn't hot checks, it's checking for
Right.
a live line.
Yes.
Much better phrased.
Page 2 is April through June. There were a total of 2,789 hours worked on a variety of work orders and projects. You can see our highest is 934 work orders, and we'll get into a minute the specifics of some of these. And the next one was special projects. Probably the majority of that special project was up there at the Tahitian Village overpass and rerouting the overhead power lines.
Mike, I'm gonna ask you an awkward question. It goes back to what Ken just mentioned on the hot checks event. Do we, I asked Curtis this, do we do most of that now, like what they call work on hot lines, or do we call it an outside company if we have to work while the line is still hot?
Are you asking if we use contractors for something?
I'm asking if your department does most of that now, or do we still go out?
We do all of it,
Okay.
except for capital projects.
Okay.
I'm not saying I won't ever tell my guy I need a contractor in here. It depends on what situation it
But
is.
they used to be pretty often way back when we used,
Richardson.
yeah,
So
yeah. Thanks.
now we put in our own underground primary on new development.
Yeah.
We do our own tree trimming. Sometimes I will bring in a contract for tree trimming, like once a year. But I try to keep it to a minimum. We do a lot of tree trimming in-house too.
Thank you.
The next page, on page 3, since work orders were the largest area of where hours were spent, is a breakdown of those hours. Please note that under number of requests, line locates was 160. We have a statutory responsibility. You've probably seen the TV commercials, call before you dig, and we have so many hours to respond and to mark both electric, water, and wastewater lines, and that is a good part of our work orders. And then limbs and lines is one that is a fairly big part of it. And then, of course, our turn on and turn off services is the other one that takes up a lot of our work orders.
So 9% of power outages, how does that compare to the past? Or I know since we're spending a lot of money to kind of cut down on that as far as, making improvements to our utility service, electric.
I think if you'll flip to the next page, that'll answer that question. That shows the numbers of meters residential for the same quarter last year. We increased in residential meters. We decreased some in commercial, and the key accounts, which are the ISD, remain constant. But your percent of reliability time, you can see that even though we had some power outages, they were minimal and did not impact our reliability factor. And we did sell more power in 2015 than we did in 2014. Water and wastewater. Water work orders, wastewater work orders were the two biggest in the water and wastewater departments. And then kind of spread out through that is your maintenance and operation of the water and wastewater system. Again, under work orders, the largest number of work orders are line locates. Again, it's that statutory requirement. And that number just keeps rising, and that does impact how we schedule things out, because we never know when we're going to get a call, and we have so many hours to get out there and get those lines located and cleared. Okay. The next page shows that we increased both in residential and commercial water customers from the last quarter last year at the same time. We went from a total of 2,963 to 3,075. And wastewater customers, we went from a total of 2,613 to 2,708. And in that same quarter, you can see that the amount of wastewater we treated significantly increased, and that will be another item tonight that we're going to talk about a little bit. The wastewater plant, as you can see, that's a pretty good jump in a year's time. Water, gallons treated, and water consumption was down for this quarter, but if you recall, April and May were pretty wet months, and our water consumption showed that, and our water loss reflected that as well. And this is towards the tail end of the AMI project, which is going to be great assistance in our water loss, but at this point it was not fully operational for this quarter. Per capita, again, because April, May, and June were wet months, our per capita dropped down for 2 months below 140 gallons per capita, and just a little above 140 for June. But I attribute that mostly to the weather during that time frame.
Can I just ask you, water usage gallon per capita, is that for the whole 3 months?
No, that's
That's per month?
per month. That's per month.
I
That's
don't know
what
how that works.
it breaks down per month.
Okay.
Like, for example, April last year, we were at
Oh, I see.
150, and this year we're about 138, so it dropped down some.
That's per day, though, right?
Right.
Yeah, per day, right, for that month. This next chart on page 9, it just shows the various wells that we use for the supply of our water. And as you will note, during this time frame, overall, except for well I, which we had some fluctuation, the static levels remained fairly constant through the 3 months with very little movement. After we pumped and the water and the pump shut off, there was very little change in the water level inside the well. The utility customer service and meter techs. Now keep in mind that the meter techs positions have been transitioning down to just one person because we no longer have meter readers at the end of this quarter, because we've gone to total automated meter reading.
Or will they be going to a different job now?
Both of them, yes, have been. One did prior to the completion, took a job somewhere else, and we didn't fill the position because we just couldn't justify it halfway through it. And then the other two were brought into the water and wastewater utilities and other areas.
Okay.
Of course, the hours worked, collecting utility payments is a big part of what gets done. Setting up new accounts, specialized billing, creating work orders, auditing accounts. We did have to send out, even though some meter reading troubleshooting, and a small number were work orders. And if you'll flip over, the biggest amount of our work orders through the utility customer service and meter tech office has been the occupancy change, which was about 150, and the rest were for various items, and some were attributed to when we were installing the new meters. They had to go out and troubleshoot, or people had some questions regarding their new meters.
So on the cutoff for non-payment, we're essentially down to 20 a month, is that
That's about right, yes,
the way
sir.
that reads? That's a good number.
And they do a great job over there.
I mean, it just means people are paying their bills.
Yes.
This new system of reading meters, who monitors that? I mean,
Stacy Moffitt, and I think Tracy will give a report on that for you.
has anybody on this council went through there and seen what we spent that money on?
Not that I'm aware of.
You got one out in your front yard.
I understand that, I'm talking about in the office. Spend a lot of money on that, not to know what it looks like or what it does.
Why don't you go figure it out?
I've seen it before somewhere, I'm just asking y'all, if y'all
No,
do it.
we've seen it, we've seen
You've seen
those.
it? Okay, that's, well, I just asked, somebody didn't say no.
No, I thought
You've seen the operation?
I haven't seen the whole operation,
Okay.
I've just seen the component parts.
And I think we gave a presentation to the council
Yeah.
at one of these, when we were talking about going into that, the different aspects of what automated meter reading would do for us.
And there's an update for letter C on the agenda.
Right. And this is just your financial revenue summary for electric sales, comparison from quarter to quarter, service fees and extension fees, and the same for water sales, wastewater sales. We are no longer operating the septic dump station. After doing a fiscal analysis of that, it was determined that we were actually losing money, and to increase the capacity of our plant by not taking it, we chose not to stay in that part of the business anymore. And this is just a question that you have asked since we've instituted payment online. These are web payment histories, and this is a 12-month history, as you can see, what's been going on.
What happened in July?
It just wasn't a full month. When she ran her report, we were really catching June.
Good.
Down at the bottom, it also includes bills being emailed. We're really trying to push that, not printing the bill, but actually emailing it when we produce the bill. And that's slowly going on.
So, almost half our bills are being paid online, or we have a couple of thousand water meters, but what, how many bills do we send out? 3,000?
Where do you send them from your end?
Oh, okay, so we're down to, we're a little past a quarter at least.
And I think about a third the last analysis I had done about 6 months ago, about a third of our bills are being paid by people coming into City Hall and paying. I was surprised that it's still staying at just a little over a third, but
The rest of them are mail in?
mail in or online.
Mail, we have draft, a lot of people are set up on draft, which is not represented here.
Well, we have to physically go do that? I mean,
We just set them up and it automatically,
okay, so we have more automatic payments than just this.
yes.
Right.
Good.
But with all these automatic payments, I just think it's surprising that a third of our customer base still comes down and pays our.
But you got two friendly folks, they want to come in and
Lots
visit
of
with
lots of
you.
people like to come through the drive-through.
Yeah, more would like to come in the office, they really do.
Got the free coffee back there?
Right. Okay. One of the projects that was approved, that we've kicked off was regarding expansion of our wastewater treatment plant. We're about 60 to 70% complete, and thought this would be an opportunity to kind of discuss with the council where we're at and what we're looking at, and then take some questions. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cooper. I think he's got some maps and stuff that he wants to hand out. And
this is Chad with me tonight.
Hi.
Fairly substantial size map here. They keep going. Send them down. Everybody got 1 minute?
have an extra one? Yeah.
That's you, yeah, we're done.
Everybody have them? Good evening, Mayor, Ross, this is Alan, Willie, how are y'all doing this evening?
I do. What's wrong?
What?
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, we'll start this off by, first of all, I think you turn to the second page, this historical wastewater flows. Mike initiated this several years ago where we have been charting the monthly average flows from the wastewater treatment plant. And this is the graph you're looking at. He typically shows it to you all, I believe. And the bottom line, or that dashed line of that, is the 75% rule. When TCQ is talking about wastewater, your plants right now, you have 2 plants down here off of Water Street. You're permitted for 1.4 million gallons per day. So according to TCQ, when you hit 75% of that flow rate, which is 1,050,000 gallons, you're required to start design on your upgrade of your plant. When you hit 90%, which is the middle line, you're required to start construction, which is 1.26 million gallons per day. And the top line, the yellow one, is at 1.4 million gallons per day. So as you can see over time, we've been trekking up and down, but we're steadily moving up slightly. And we'll talk about this later on as far as the where we project this to start hitting these dotted dashed lines. But we thought we'd sequentially go through some items that just to give you an education on what we're trying to do here. We've talked over the last several years about CCNs, and I think y'all all know what those are. Those are certificated areas for service. This one in front of you right here is the water CCN. And you can see the yellow is the certificated area to the city of Bastrop. This area right there is aqua, but everything else around you is aqua. This is Tahitian Village, and here's Highway 20, and 21 would be back here. And here's 71 right through town. So keep that in mind, that picture, because the next one's wastewater, and you can see how much larger it is. Many years ago, the city went had an extended effort to try to get a larger CCN for wastewater. So we go all the way out to Highway 21, here's 20, 71, 95 is right through here, but we go way beyond, almost up to Excess Ranch and way east. Then Tahitian Village is on the south. So what we're talking about today is the wastewater system, in particular everything west of the river. That's where the main growth of the city is west. And so if you're looking, our objective as far as what we thought our objective was to develop a standard for establishing peak flows for undeveloped areas. And a lot of this area west of the river is undeveloped. This is a map that we developed several years ago, but it talks about, for example, the Hampton Inn right there. This is Highway 71 once again, going right through town. And basically what the purpose of this map was to show the lines and the capabilities and the capacities of each lift station and line as it exists today. I won't go in great detail, but if you ever need to talk, we can definitely talk about that in great detail. Hunter's Crossing is right here. Here's Highway 304. So this is an area we're moving westward, as you can tell. And our study will show that as you see the maps further on. Right now, the way this all works, for your information, is all of Hunter's Crossing goes along Highway 71 to the Central Lift Station. Bob Ryan, all that subdivision goes to the Central Lift Station. Then it's pumped from here all the way over across underneath the river to the treatment plant. This small area up here, here's 71 once again, at the river, goes to the river lift station, which is a small lift station, and it pumps also across the river. Ultimately, what we're talking about doing is severing the systems, and then everything from the central lift station would go back to the south here to the new site at 304 for the treatment plant.
Say it again.
Everything from central lift station, which is the main flow, about 50% of the
And
flow.
where's we'll draw the line, what is that?
That's central lift station.
I know, but tell me where it is.
Here's Highway 71.
Well, what's that?
Here's Hassler.
Hassler, okay,
And then it's basically a dead end right here.
okay.
Here's Marie, Walmart's right there. It's right near the substation.
We have smaller versions of this in the handouts.
Right, it's just real difficult to read.
They're a little hard to read.
Right, and I couldn't do anything better on that on
Well,
the
sure,
exercise.
but I mean, it gives us a better idea
Right.
since that's upside down.
And we'll take this one.
Gene, can I ask you a question
Yeah,
right quick
sure,
as you talk about this? And you started out the conversation saying that we had, I think you said 2 treatment plants. What's the total, as we talk about percentages of where we're going, what is the total capacity of the sewer plants?
1.4 million.
1.4?
But now, keep in mind, back before I came, you sold a portion of that capacity, or 200,000 gallons, or reserved back 200,000 gallons. These no, yes. So, in essence,
They're a customer of ours.
right, but in essence, they're a wholesale customer, and so when we look at our customers and our need, our true capacity is 1.2.
Yeah.
Because we have to take that 200,000 gallons off because we've reserved that back.
Does your chart show them? Their chart in there? Are they in the
Yes,
chart?
yes.
Project scope, once again, the projection of future wastewater flows west of the river, capacity evaluation of the existing wastewater treatment plant 1 and 2, which is 1.4 million, written on this piece of paper, evaluation of wastewater treatment plant options to serve areas west of the river, evaluation of wastewater infrastructure required to serve areas west of the river, and cost estimating of treatment and infrastructure options west of the river, and preparing a summary report. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. We're not all the way through this scope of items, but we'll go through all this as much as we can tonight. Wesley and our team has worked on a design criteria for developing, this is once again a map of the area. Here's the river, area west. And all these areas that have little yellow tickets on them are areas that really are undeveloped. And what we have done is assigned it a acreage, and in most cases we've assigned it a land use. So we're taking our design criteria and applying a land use to each one of these tracts. For example, Bastrop Village West is all east and west, and going to be subdivision mainly. And it's assigned that item, and then in the back, you'll see that we have a table that has flow rates associated with each one of those areas. So we can, as time progresses, we can ascertain where that flow needs to go and how the plants need to be expanded. So this is a very involved map that shows a lot of information, much more than we have time for tonight. But basically, this once again is Highway 71. Here's 304. And then the different areas are all talk about the east, the CCN area, which is the green area. And then the red is the Bastrop West future.
The red is your future, what we've deemed as being future commercial areas. Your green is future residential. These are outside of, really, very little of those areas are being studied in detail because they're kind of
Way beyond
our scope of what we believe will be developed in the near future.
So with that in mind, you want to talk
So
about...
where's the end of your line, your red
This
there?
is Highway 21.
And
So,
that's the
so
end of your CC.
you don't expect any commercial development on 21 anytime soon?
No.
Okay.
Not that would be serviced by a city wastewater treatment plant.
Okay,
Right, it'd have to be a separate plant or something on that area, but it is within your CCN.
right.
So Chad, you're going to talk about the future wastewater flows, which is a,
You'll flip further down in your packet, past the, like we pointed out, there are smaller maps. You'll come to a table.
that shows this table
Looks
right
like
here.
this here.
That's too far.
It is passed with us.
So none of this takes into any consideration if any growth was to happen east of the railroad tracks and all this undeveloped property we have east of the railroad tracks?
East of the railroad track.
This way back toward the hill?
No, sir.
None of this takes into consideration if it was to grow somehow?
Or this side of the river, or this side of Agnes, right?
No. We did, what we're applying, once again, if you recall, the council approved the demand and population demand report that CHN2 Hill did back in May of 2014. We've used that report not only for water, but also for wastewater. So it does apply projections as far as growth in the whole city. So we are looking at that. And Chad's going to talk about that a little bit, but we are going to be talking about growth on the east side also, but in particular, we're talking about the west.
Because that's where we're seeing the largest increase in our flows coming into the wastewater plant.
Everything, most everything's the west side of the river from now on.
And it's not very feasible at times if somebody were to try to build a large residential community out here, they don't have sewer services, and they would know that up front, and it's not feasible for the city to accommodate, if you will, an isolated incident in that manner. They would have to look at, having their own wastewater treatment plant or something of that nature. It would be a entirely different animal. So like Gene pointed out, the table that sits here is a projection based on the growth rates that were established by CH2 and Hill in the report. That we adapted the growth rate that was in their report and utilized that to grow, if you will, our existing sanitary sewer flow that the plant is experiencing today, to attempt to delineate when the existing plant would run out of capacity. Rather than delve into each year, the synopsis would be this, if you look at this table here. Okay. Well, we'll go to two different, we kind of split the city into two different regions, the west of the Colorado and east of the Colorado, and then lastly their allotment that we have from them. So what we've been able to do is we have all of the lift station data, and we're able to add that up. And also we know what CID number 2 is also producing. So we're able to add those two flows together and then subtract it from our total that the wastewater treatment plant is experiencing, and then we back into what the east is currently producing. So you'll notice that today you have about, call it 417 or 418,000 gallons coming from the west side of the river, and approximately 350 that the city is contributing on the east side that goes to the plant. with approximately 85 coming from the Tahitian area. So as you grow those items out and going back to to this box, this is the trigger points that Gene pointed out to earlier, the 75% rule, the 90% rule. So looking at the growth rate to hit the 75% rule, we're approximating that would happen in year 2019, which means that an expansion would have to begin design at that point of the existing plant. And then, of course, the 90% rule would then happen approximately 5 years later. We'd have to be under construction for an expansion. So that's really that's one of the things that this does. It also expands out into a timeline that we'll show you later that goes into much more detail as we expand, because the existing plant on the east side can only grow so much. So we have to look at another avenue to continue to treat the wastewater from the city.
Gene, let me ask.
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
Or you can answer this. What would, as far as WCID, what would have to be, or the growth to meet what you're talking about at 85,000 now to 110,000 in 4 years from now, for as far as gallons per day from 84 to 109? What area does that encompass out there in WCID?
That's all the area that they're served. You remember, they've laid a multitude of lines.
Well, LCR,
And a lot of the lots aren't being served right now. And,
oh, I mean, because of the fire, I mean, you expect a lot of that to be developed? Or?
well, at the last meeting, for example, I think they lost right at 300 homes,
Yeah,
and they're at 325.
so they built that many back?
Right.
Okay.
So they're above where they were 4 years ago.
So this doesn't take any count of development in Unit 6?
Well, once again, we've applied the 3.8% growth over the whole city. That was established by that report. And we didn't want to change from that report because we're relying pretty well heavily on that report for everything, water and wastewater, to substantiate our needs for the city.
We're only, I know it doesn't matter much down the road, but we're only committed to 200,000.
That's right.
gallons.
Which you'll notice in year 2035, somewhere roughly, probably 2034.
And if you recall in council meeting, we've talked many times that this report's going to have to be reviewed every 3 to 5 years because things are changing every day. And this is the best we can do for right now. But 3 years down the road, it might be entirely different.
Maybe 5% or it could be 2%.
So,
Thank you for that.
well,
Got one more.
So, and you're predicting in 2017, we need to be drawing pictures.
yes. We have a timeline.
2019.
2019,
We'll go into
we
detail.
is that the timeline?
Let's see, we've got future, we need
Oh, 2019.
Yeah.
Okay.
So going back to this map, just to give you an idea of really what our true study area is for the next plant. You'll notice that there's some large bold numbers here, 1 through 6. Okay, and these areas are what we've anticipated would be going to wastewater treatment plant number 3 ultimately. Now that may shift over time, say 40, 50 years down the road, if there does now become a need to establish another plant. We may shift some of this area, potentially could shift over to a separate plant. But because of Bastrop Village East and West, which we know will likely be happening sometime in the near future, we've got to encompass those guys and bring them down to the plant.
And keep in mind, this is Highway FM 20, and this is 304.
And the way that these areas in part were established is based, these magenta or pinkish looking lines are kind of what we, kind of drainage areas, which equates to a sewer shed area as well. In other words, what can gravity to a certain area and then be able to eventually bring it down to the plant.
Have we talked about the capacity of that new plant?
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute, because we've
It's just, we got land, but it's up for grabs about it.
well, since 2007, we flip-flopped back and forth on which direction to go.
Right. Or what size.
Or what size, right.
Okay.
And we'll touch on that with 2 different scenarios in a moment.
Right.
3 technically. And what's also with this map we were able to do is kind of look to see where potential trunk lines getting down to the plant may be able to go, both in the near future, if you will, relatively speaking, and then potentially later on outside the scope of even our current project, but something worth noting for future as far as where trunk lines will end up being.
And once again, all the red along the 304, 20, and 21 are all commercial areas. We're assuming that that's the way that's going to develop over time.
If I recall, I think we just did a 500-foot offset of the right-of-way, and assuming that would, be 1,000 foot wide.
Those houses on 304 going to be turning, you think that's going to go to commercial?
It's more of a,
It's a guess.
you're talking about a
Yeah.
big guess on a large scale. So even though you may not end up with commercial, say, if these lots that are, these existing homes that are here, maybe you end up with one back here. So it's kind of a give and take.
I don't see those people leaving the.
It depends on the money.
Where their lift station is. Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, for the money, it's the best approximation that we're able to give.
So the last question the mayor had, this is probably the most important matter. Chair, why don't you stand right here and I'll stand over there. You got one of my arms.
So what we have here is basically three scenarios. The top scenario in red is effectively your
This one.
existing plant as it is today in the timeline. And again, this timeline and the trigger points that are established on this timeline are taken back to the growth rate that we had. So today, our existing flow is about 0.85 MGD. And if you recall, the plant's current capacity is 1.4. So roughly in 2018, 2019 is when we hit that 75% rule and would have to start design of an expansion. Okay. So fast forwarding, you're right around 2022 when you hit the 90% rule, which means you need to start construction in 2023, 24, somewhere in there is when you have the expansion complete to 1.8 million. The one item of note is right after the expansion is completed to 1.8 million, which is all that can be done at the existing facility based on the size of available land. The next year is when you hit the 75% rule again. So it's not a very good situation because as soon as you get done, you've got to start again. And the other thing to point out is because of the limited amount of room at the existing plant, to expand in that small location is a little bit more costly per gallon. So the moral of the story here is the existing plant's just going to run out of capacity and room, so we have to look at another option. So the two here on the lower end are the other options. The top is, the scenario one here is the east and west both having an operational plant, meaning we keep the plant today that's in operation in place, and we add the third plant on the west side. The scenario two is actually shutting down the eastern plant entirely, shifting all the flows from the east side of town down to the new plant. The obviously advantage of that is less operational expenses, and you can shut down that plant entirely. So we looked at both of these options. Same thing applies. So in 2019, you're sitting, actually a little bit earlier in 2019, we hit our design standpoint. The one thing of note here is we have an existing permit, and I don't know, Gina, if you want to touch on the permitting.
The permit, if you recall, this plant was designed probably 10 years ago, the plant out there at 304. And it was under TCQ rules 317, chapter 317. Since that time, they've changed from 317 to 217 and have made the chapters more stringent, more requirements. But every 3 to 5 years, the city has to amend or renew their permits. So we've been renewing that permit out there on 304 since 10 years ago, every 3 to 5 years. And then they told us this last time that this is the last time. So what we're pointing out here is it expires in 2019, right? We would hope that the city would be under design and being ready to go out to bids for a new plant. And hopefully they'll allow us to continue that same permit, that renewal, because it's much cheaper. It costs a lot of money to do a new permit.
And there's
We don't have
risks.
to start on that now, do we? Is that something we need to start on now?
Well, it's going to depend upon which option we choose, and we'll talk about
So the
that.
2019 is starting construction or starting just
Design.
planning? So we're good, we're grandfathered more or less, so to speak, until 2019, somewhere.
Yes, sir.
in that-
The
that-
permit is valid till 2019.
Okay, all right.
The risk that you take in letting that expire, if you were, they may not let you go back into the Colorado River. So
Okay.
it's something you don't really want to let lapse.
Right.
Let me ask a question if I could. In the existing plant that we have down the street down here, did we not buy some property next to it in case we wanted to expand for some reason?
Yes, sir, we did.
Okay, let me ask you this question this way then. Say for some reason that property that we're basically building this plant for, the Weaver track. And
Basically,
what's it
yeah.
called, Village West?
Yes, sir.
Say for some reason they went away again. Would it make more sense to go back there and expand the existing plant than shut it down and go build a new one across the river?
Can we factor that into our conversation?
Yes.
Or say we didn't grant them, we didn't give them sewer plant. I mean, if it goes away or we don't give them sewer, could we factor that? I mean, y'all know you're doing this on the fly, but could we factor that in somehow into the scenarios?
It's a tough evaluation, again, because we're utilizing the growth to establish when the plants will meet their capacity, not individual developments. So it's much tougher to anticipate individual developments as far as when they'll come online. So we have Pecan Park, we have an estimate of how many lots that they plan on bringing online and so on, but it's all the people that we don't know about.
But my question is there a policy decision that we might kick in terms of how much, who we do wastewater for and who we don't, if there are MUDs involved, for example?
And there is a decision that has to be made with the Bastrop Village
Yeah,
West.
yes, and
So I
I
mean,
think,
but there could be others. So
Sure.
it could be, there could be policy implications that trump the 3.8 growth percentage. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And there, to a point, you still have your city limit individuals. So if they bring, if they're within the city,
We've got to provide.
we've got to provide.
Oh, we can control that. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We can't control that big bunch.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
You're right, sorry.
And
Okay.
truthfully, talking about CCNs, we're obligated somewhat, if we can afford it, to provide service in our CCN to people with wastewater. Now, if they're on the far west edge, like we talked about earlier, or it would cost the city too much money, then we wouldn't have to do that. They could opt out also if it's a big tract of land.
Okay, but that's at least a possible minor factor somewhere. Okay, I'm sorry. But
No, that's fine. It's
Sorry,
questions.
but I just want to follow up on Willie's raising
Sure.
the question.
So what you'll notice between the two scenarios, whether it's east or west, the initial, series of events remains the same. And that is, you hit your 75% rule, you'll hit your 90% rule, something has to be under construction. The difference between keeping your east plant open, on the west side, our initial phase, we're looking at a 1.5 MGE plant, whereas if we close the eastern side, we'd be looking at a 2.5 MGE plant for our initial run.
Say that again, sir?
For the new plant?
2.5 would be in the new plant?
It would be the new plant if we opt to close the eastern plant,
And if we didn't close the eastern? it'd be-
1.5. Now, there is somewhat of an economy to scale that occurs with that change. We haven't really drilled down to cost at this point.
Let me ask a stupid question this way. Is it common or is it practical to close down a sewer plant after 25 years of operation?
Your efficiencies of a newer plant are much greater. So from an
That came
operational
online
standpoint,
about in 1990s.
right, and an operational standpoint, there would be efficiencies there.
But you haven't done an analysis to see how many years it would take to actually make up the difference in cost of building a new plant.
We did some really, really rough numbers, Gary, and don't hold me to these right now, but if you project it out, it's a lot of money over that, is that 40 years we're going all the way to the end?
I think we went to, where did we go to? 2045, I think is where
Okay,
we
30 years.
stopped our projection.
We're looking at, was it 35 or 40 million for everything?
Something like
That
that.
was a long-term projection for everything. Initially, we're looking at, I think, I want to say 11 million for the top one. But we're looking at a lot of money.
Yeah, my question was, how long would it take if you went to this option to pay for what we would lose by shutting down the operation first?
And then there's some other issues. We got backwater back down the river. So there's gonna be a point where we're gonna have to put a bigger force main underneath the river to get the water back, because it's gonna exceed our pipe that we have in there right now. So that's all in play, but then the lift stations change. So we're gonna be having to pump water all the way back to 304.
If you divide it,
If you only have one plant.
oh, okay.
You take everything from the east back towards the west.
That's what I'm saying. To me, it sounds like it's gonna take a long time, if ever, to pay for the cost of what, when you shut this down, all the costs of diverting and building a larger plant and
Well, there's some unknowns that we don't know either. You know, the Corps of Engineers could change their permitting process entirely over 10 years, 15, 20 years. We don't know what's gonna happen in that period of time. So every time you go underneath the river, there's some new issues that you have to pass or get through.
I'm just saying, it seems to me it's easier to keep what you got and keep going than it is to,
But the two plants would not require, we would be grandfathered with the two plants.
That's right. Well,
From
we're not even,
that possible Corps of
exactly.
Engineers change.
We wouldn't have to do anything different for them.
Okay, which is another reason to support Gary's supposition.
What's the functional life of the plant, the existing
Probably 20
plant?
to 30 years.
So it's coming to its end then?
And keep in mind that when the city council, a lot of forethought in this, way before me, Whitley, you were on council probably when y'all bought that, 26 acres or so?
Yeah, that was a
But
real good.
But it's based for 4 or 5 trains, and each train's gonna be 1 million to 1.5 million. So we have a capability of 6 to 8 million gallons on that plant, that site. So it has a lot of expansion capabilities for the future.
So it's not gonna be obsolete and then?
No, but as time progresses, and
Right.
Trey would know more about this, is that the older he gets, the technology's gonna improve, and it's gonna be less and less space as far as footprint possibly.
Okay.
but you can take the old plant out and build a new plant on the site.
That's right. Because, as I said, technology's gonna change. So when that happens, then it's very possible to make a bigger plant there and have a smaller footprint. But the cost is gonna be
And at the same time, the longer you would wait to try to do something like that, you have to do something with all those flows on a daily basis. You're gonna have to have infrastructure in place to shift that flow around while you were to.
Yeah, I understand.
And
but
Mike mentioned something to us one time about what we've been calling the package plant. It's extraordinarily higher than it used to be, and it's just almost getting crazy to even think about building it.
Well, that's what, point I wanted to make here tonight. I think the real challenge, back in 2007, when we started the housing downturn, and the council looked at the cost of building a new plant versus expanding at the existing site, because of the economic conditions, we shifted our focus to putting a package plant at the existing site, and the largest package plant that we could put on there would be about 400,000 gallons. Today, now fast forwarding almost 10 years down the road, package plants have gone up exponentially when we first looked at them, and that's why I wanted Gene to lay this timeline out for you, because if we take the route of expanding the existing plant at the current flows within a 8 to a 10-year time frame, you're going to be right back into designing and building the plant on the west side and taking on another substantially large amount of debt that I just don't know if the city could handle, have the financial capacity to have to do that in that short time frame.
And the 400,000 would cost a whole lot more than a fourth of 1.6 million. I mean, it would be pretty cost inefficient to build,
$4.5 million right now.
to build that little one.
So that's the dilemma that we're confronted with. But also we're confronted with the dilemma, we're meeting with rural development and various funding agencies. We just have so much financial capacity that we can issue bonds for, and we're going to have to be doing some rate analysis and some rate restructuring so that we can kind of plan and ease this in. Though it seems like we got a lot of time, time is not on our side if we sit and don't do anything. So we're going to be fine-tuning and finishing up. I think Gene estimates 6 to 8 weeks. He'll have this complete for the council to have in a booklet format, and then we're going to make some tough decisions and we're going to have to be creative in how we finance this.
So do we have or will we have a plan for leave what we've got in place, build the new plant when we need to, figure out how much we need to build and what it would cost? And is that where you're going?
Yes, sir.
I mean, I don't know how anybody else feels, but I don't see how there's an option to do with that. I mean, I think y'all did a really smart thing looking at the west side of the river when we weren't looking west side as much as we should have been, but y'all made a really good decision getting that sewer plant over there on the west side.
Yeah.
That's going to be one of the biggest decisions that y'all ever made during that time period. And we've got to start thinking west all the time now, and that's what we're doing. So.
And I apologize, Doc, you were probably on council too at that time.
It's okay.
Doc too.
I think I was.
I'm sure you were.
Please take this material and look at it, because I've been briefly telling you that we've been working on the wastewater issues, and now I'm going to be keeping it to the forefront because we got to be making some strategic decisions over the next year where we want to go.
Just a
Better
ball,
early
just,
than late.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No.
Just a ballpark, and this was just a really, I did some numbering, some sketching before. 2045 is Channing, Kit. With both plants on each side, we're looking at 4.8 million gallons per day plant capacity. Only on the west side, we're looking at 5 million gallons a day, so it's really close as far as what I came up with. The one existing is 42 million plus. This is total everything. And the one on the other side is 41 million, so they're real close together as far as cost.
So we're talking to do a $5 million,
Ultimately,
5 million, and we would do it in pieces though.
yes, buildings,
Right, what's the first piece gonna cost?
I think I had,
I think roughly $11 million.
Because that also includes the trunk line to get things down there.
Right. And
So,
Lift station upgrades.
all in 11 million,
11, 12.
more or less?
well,
Give or
the
take a
plan,
few
the
billion.
plan and the
Trunk line.
trunk lines.
11 or 12 million dollars.
Okay, friends,
And then if we just did the
we'll
expansion,
be gone.
and my concern is if we just did the expansion and a rough number, as Gene has pointed out, of expanding for 400,000 gallons is 4.5 million, and that only buys us 8 years, and we're right back in the same boat we are now. Put that debt, and then put on top of that, because your prices are going to do nothing but go up, probably be 16 million. It's going to be hard unless we've had an unbelievable growth rate to spread that cost out over.
Well, and another thing we got to start doing if we're not is we got to start letting this wastewater business pay for itself.
Yes, we're looking at that. Yes.
And maybe more, maybe buying us a little money down the road, because it's a business that, people don't like paying wastewater bills, but they also don't like their commodes not working,
Right. Well, we're looking at,
sorry, my wife said toilets. Nobody says commodes anymore.
we are looking at one option, maybe a surcharge for a few years to build up for restricted
It's,
funds.
it's the opposite of fixing the infrastructure on this side.
That's right.
Just then it's the same thing. We got to do something to catch up
Yep.
or to get ahead. Questions?
No, other than I think, I mean, we know what's ahead of us now. We don't want to wait until the 12th hour. We have a little time, but not a lot of time. But I think if we stay focused, we can do it in a financially responsible manner and meet the wastewater needs of our community.
Anybody think it's not a high priority? I believe we agree with you, Mike.
Right. Well, I can tell you, if we push it off, it's going to be much more expensive. That I can tell you.
Good report, thank you.
And the bottom line is we don't want to get in trouble with TCQ.
Right. Or they'll come in and take over our plant.
So I love that the answer about we've got to get something done by 19, whatever we do, from 2 or 3 angles.
And then closing up, basically, the project scope is complete except for the cost, fine-tune cost estimating and the report itself. And we'll be bringing that to you shortly.
Okay. I thought it would be helpful now that the system is up and fully operational, is to give you an update and overview on the AMI system and how it's doing, and I think if she hasn't left.
I'm right here.
She's
Okay.
already moved up. You want to take us back in the back? That's Willie's starting stuff back there?
No, we're good.
Okay.
I had Tracy Moffett, the utility customer service, just kind of give me a bullet. I mean, obviously she touches it every day. I'm not over there touching it every day. So we are currently completely changed out. We have 4 residential accounts refusing electric. They're refusing the AMI electric meters, so we do go out and read those 4 meters. I think we're going to work towards trying to educate them as we go along and try to get those switched out.
Did they give any
eventually.
reason?
Yes. Well, I know of 2 of them. One of them was his wife had brain surgery, and he was very cautious, and then another one had to do with a child, and I don't know about the other 2. But at
You're talking
4
about the-
out of all the ones we switched, we still feel like this is still pretty good.
And we've got somebody roaming around the countryside anyway, right? So
Right.
they can just stop by and read it. And
Well,
read it
yeah,
the same day you read it?
We send them out the day we pull the
Same
reads
day.
on the AMI, right.
Cool.
We are in the final leg of shifting meter reads to the end of the month. Last month, we pulled them on the 19th. This month, we're going to pull them on the 24th or 25th. We're trying to be sensitive to, especially during this time of the year, not to extend someone's reads too far. Even though we're trying to pull those reads, we don't want to add too many days to their bills. So we're trying to juggle.
Let's make sure we understand that. Some people are getting more than a 30-day bill because we're having
Because
to
we're-
true this up.
Right.
So if anybody fusses to any of us, we know what that's about.
Yes.
And it's only a one-time adjustment. Once we get everybody at the end,
Correct.
everybody's on 30
And we
days
have a
out.
note on their bill saying that, letting them know that we're stretching out your, anyway.
But we're doing it in increments.
Good.
Yes.
That's very sensitive. I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Yes, so we have a couple more months, and then we should be at the end of the month. We currently utilize leak detection features on the system. There are certain reports that the ladies can run every morning to monitor, for instance, increased consumption. If they see these, they will contact the customer and let them know that they have an unusually high consumption, that they may want to check for a leak. So they are using the system proactively ahead of the game instead of all, also, if the meter is showing excessively high reads, they send out a meter technician to go see if there's a visible leak or if there's anything. That's something we're using our meter tech supervisor for. We are able to run reports weekly to assess meters that are not communicating. So we will do a work order. Sometimes the radios get run over by mowers or various things like that. So if it's not communicating, then we have to send them out to see why. I think she told me out of all the meters, we have 8 right now that we're having to troubleshoot and try to figure out why we're not getting the read. That's pretty good still. If you do a percentage, that's still pretty low. We are able to answer questions with more assurance. When customers call, they can actually give them down to the day and the hour of what their meter is reading, and they're able to print graphs and reports for them so that they're able to answer their questions a lot quicker and a lot easier, and they have proof behind it that for whatever reason their sprinklers turned on at 2 a.m. We are in the process of setting up alarm notices to be emailed to various staff for electric meter alerts, and this will help BP&L have the opportunity to assess the meter remotely before a situation may arise. So they're working to try to set some of those alarms in the system so that when things occur in the system, we get notice and are able to react to it.
You may have just said this and I missed it, but what kind of a detailed report can we get? Just a month, or can we get a daily report?
Oh no, it reads it like within the hour,
So we could get,
hours, days.
could we show somebody what you said, that their sprinkler was on at 2 in the morning?
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
And it really helps the ladies when people do call, they can go back and look at their, reads and see when it jumped and what time it was.
Weird big brother.
Okay?
And very few complaints, I take it. I hadn't heard from anybody.
Yeah, the ladies field the calls, they're great. They're very good on the phone. And no, I don't think so.
So can you tell me every time that Willie flushes his toilet?
Yeah.
You want to know that?
Hey, I got your cell number. When I get up tonight, I'll call you tonight.
Make it easier.
Flushing.
I'll text you tonight.
Is that off the record? Thank you, Tracy, great job.
An item that I want to add to your critical needs list, which we're I think going to have to follow up on. Just want to hand this out to you to begin thinking about it, because again, it is first of all, it's a utility issue. And secondly, it has, as growth has continued, oops, I'm sorry. As we've already discussed tonight, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll listen to
What we got?
I got
More. Do the top of this one?
There's two more. As we previously discussed tonight, the west side of the city is growing at a much faster rate than the east side. But the water system infrastructure components, most especially your elevated and ground storage tanks, are all on the east side, up on top of Mayfest Park and at the Willow Plant field. So it's up to the east side to keep the west side water flowing and supplied. We do have a well on the west side, but it is not of sufficient size to meet all the water needs on the west side. So, and we only have one large transmission main feeding from the east to the west side. If you recall, a couple of years ago or so, when they were doing the State Highway 20 overpass, there was about a quarter to half an acre tract of land that was a residual from the overpass that we bought for virtually pennies. I mean, it was a couple $1,000s. But it was big enough not only to put an elevated tank on, but it matches the elevation of the elevated tank at Mayfest Park. And that was a coincidence, but a great coincidence, because whenever you size your elevated tanks, you try to keep them at the same elevation. And because of the demands and such, we think in the next couple of years, max, that we're going to have to extend from Hunter's Crossing a line up, build that elevated tank, which would be a 1 million gallon elevated tank, and put another main connecting approximately here on 71 from 95 and 71 across all the way over to here, and creates a circular system and both of your tanks, and you'll create an optimized water system and how water will flow and keep your system optimally operating. And it's becoming every day more of an issue because of the demand for water on that side of town. And
When you say the demand for water on that side of town, you're not talking about past Highway 20?
I'm not talking
Because
about,
that's not our CCN.
right,
Okay. So
but I'm talking about fire flow demands, water pressure demands, and things of that nature. And so I just wanted to bring this to your attention tonight because it's not something we briefly have talked about it, but I think it's going to come sooner than we anticipated just because of the retail and commercial growth that we've had. Okay. All right. In order to talk about E, we will need to go into executive session if you want, and then come back out and talk about E, because I'll have to show you how we stand financially as the fund balance.
What about F and G? Anybody can do that and let go, or?
Yeah, we can do that right now if y'all wanted to talk about that,
Is
so.
that, is E that big of a deal tonight? Is that, what does that affect by talking about that tonight?
One of your topics, I think.
You brought it up.
Well, then it's one of my topics.
And I'm saying, I'm sure we'll have an executive session Tuesday night.
It's up to you. I put down what I.